Hello, I'm Denise J. Charles, the author of Tonight I Am a Butterfly, Celebrating Seasons of Change, and welcome to this third segment of my series, Read With Me, where I promised to read you 7 readings from my recent book, my most recent book, and it is a book of 61 readings, so I'm only going through 7 of them. So of course you still have reason to get a copy of this motivational and inspirational book. Now, this reading this evening is very, very personal. It's very dear, very near to my heart. And I had a little bit of qualms about reading it. So let me do a disclaimer right at the beginning. Let me say here that I love my parents. I absolutely love them. I honor them. I respect them. And there has been a lot of healing in the relationship between myself and my father. And he has basically rewritten our relationship. And he's in his 80s now, and we are very, very close. I love my dad. I always have. But there is peace in our relationship. And this writing actually is not directly about him. It is called Catching Practice. And it is reading number 34. And you know, we hear a lot about values are not taught, they're caught. So in this reading, I share some very personal details about my own life and about the values I was able to catch from my mom, in spite of all that she went through. So again, I begin with the quote at the beginning of the reading. And what I'll do, I will try to capture most of the reading. I won't necessarily read every single line. But of course, remember to get my book, Tonight I Am a Butterfly, Celebrating Seasons of Change. Catching Practice, reading number 34. Home is where we construct the foundation on which our entire lives are built. It's the heart of everything we will become. Larry and Tiz Hutch. Very often, our childhood plays a significant part in our adult behavior. What we see and experience in our home and how we were socialized has the capacity to shape our current relationships. From my mother, who is still alive, I learned some valuable tools about love and marriage. Yes, I am from a different generation and we may see many things differently, but I have come to value the teaching power of her own experience, which I witnessed firsthand. From her, I caught the values which have developed in me a deep sense of relationship loyalty. My parents' marriage did not work. While I have very detailed memories of my childhood going back to when I was about 3 years old, I cannot remember ever experiencing a sense of harmony in the home. Like most little girls, I remember having a very close attachment to my mother and a very pronounced emotional disengagement from my father. But then again, this was to be expected because even as a young child, I was somehow always intuitively aware that my father was hurting my mother, and I did not like it. But this article is not about my father. My mother taught me about the power of resilience. She was from the era where women, especially housewives, now known as stay-at-home mothers, tolerated quite a bit from their strained partners. Yes, my father cheated and everyone knew it. His cheating ways resulted in a thick, palpable sense of unhappiness that pervaded everything we tried to do as a family. It was easy to see that where marriage was concerned, my mother was unfulfilled and unhappy. Yet she did not buckle. In those days, counselors and therapists were not en vogue. There were no internet websites on love and relationships, no internet chat rooms or Facebook friends to sound off on. Yet my mother held on. She did not become a pill popper or a consumer of alcohol, nor did she cheat in revenge. Don't be misguided. She was no easy walkover. She was assertive in her own way. She did not quietly and glibly accept that a marriage characterized by infidelity was to be her lot in life. I remember her articulating her pain. I remember her tears. She was hurt and disappointed, but never once did she encourage my brother and me to hate or disrespect our father. In a situation where she perhaps had every right to lose it emotionally, and where I would definitely be throwing things, she remained dignified. Like many women today, she wanted her family to remain intact, so she prayed and hoped and made a decision to wait it out. As a grown woman, I have told her that I don't think I could have put up with all that she endured. But I understood then, and I understand now why she did it. So from her experiences, I came into my own by determining that what I would and would not do in my own marriage. I could not knowingly live with prolonged infidelity as she did, but I understand that marriage takes courage and a willingness to work things out. I do not perceive her decision to stay as emerging from a place of weakness, but from a place of strength, and from her own interpretation of what it meant to live for one's family. As she and I both learned, life is not always fair by our own estimation, and there are no guarantees that we will always get what we want, but we do not give up on our own happiness and sense of peace. We carry on. So when my father filed for divorce in my adult years, she did not come apart at the seams, go into depression, or dwell in intense anger and bitterness. In fact, she navigated that time like any other seamless transition, like when I left home at 19 to be married. She went on with her life. As much as my mother had wanted her family to stay together when we were young, she did not allow my father's infidelity to define her. I never witnessed her in poor me mode. She did not host pity parties or for one moment allow herself to go to pieces. She exuded strength, strived to encourage other women in broken relationships, and concentrated on living and thriving. She deepened her involvement in church, her relationship with God, and learned to give strength to others even when her life was far from perfect. Today, in her 80s, my mother's appearance belies her age. She looks really, really great and is a nifty dresser still. She seeks out my opinion on shoes and the latest fashion. She never had another man in her life. That was her choice. But in doing so, she inadvertently taught me that a woman does not need a man to define who she is, even though to have one would not have meant that she was weak. Kudos goes to my mother and to all great women who continue to teach us through their experiences and whose values are definitely worth catching. Now, this is near and dear to me, as I said, and remember I said in my very first reading that each reading comes with an interactive activity at the end. So this one comes with 2 questions. I didn't read every single line. I did skip a few of them and try to condense the reading as much as possible so that we could reflect together at the end, and I could still keep this within a certain time frame. The first question is, describe the values caught and lessons learned from parents or significant individuals in your life. How have these values shaped the individual you have become? You know, it is very important for us to look into ourselves and try to think of the people who have influenced us. And, you know, we often hear people say that, oh, people can't make you do anything. People can't make us do anything. We make our own choices. But we can be influenced. We can be influenced, and we can be influenced positively and we can be influenced negatively. Now, obviously, we want to focus on those positive influences. So I want you to think right now of anyone. It may not have been a parent. It could have been a teacher, a primary teacher, a secondary teacher, somebody you met further on in your life at university, or maybe your first job, or somebody in the neighborhood who looked out for you. Somebody who taught you values. You know, we talk about values being caught as opposed to just being taught, because it is not what we say, but it is what we model to other people. And that's the point of this reading, that back in that day when I was raised by my mom, there was not a lot of talking about life to your child. There was not a lot of, let's sit down and have a discussion about life. Let's sit down and have a discussion about men or about marriage or what you should not tolerate, and, you know, about relationship principles and the things that we do today and the things that we sound off on so readily on social media and so on. That was not the case when I was a child growing up. And I know it was not the case for many of you either. It still might not be the case for some people today, even though we have a wealth of information. But what was, to me, more poignant, and what I've come to realize as an adult, is that what has influenced me was not what my mother said, but what my mother did. My mother modeled, well, she modeled Christ, because she's a Christian. She modeled Christ, and she modeled love. She modeled compassion. And it didn't mean that she was putting up with foolishness willingly, or you know, as some women today would want to suggest that, you know, you're liberated, so you just walk out on the first sign of trouble, you put that man in his place, and you move on with your life. I mean, there are some circumstances perhaps where abuse is involved. Not that infidelity isn't abusive, you know, in terms of if it's ongoing in the relationship, it doesn't have an abusive impact. But you understand what I'm saying. It isn't every issue or every challenge in your relationship that you should just up and leave. There are things that need to be worked out. There are things that you need to look at together as a couple and to discuss and to see how each of you may have influenced what happened in the relationship, the breakdown in the relationship. So all I'm saying is that, you know, all the complexity that goes into making a marriage work and to making a relationship work, that, you know, she didn't, perhaps, she was not in the space perhaps where she could talk to me about it and articulate it to me clearly, but certainly she demonstrated a lot by the things that she did, and by the fact that she didn't in any way encourage my brother or myself to hate our father or to disrespect him in any way. In fact, we prayed for him quite regularly. And today, as an adult, as a full adult, you know, a woman in middle age, I can see how those prayers have been answered. I can see the turnaround in my father's life. I can see the turnaround in our relationship and in our family, and the wounds that have been healed, you know, in all of those relationships, because my father and my mother get along quite well today, even though they're divorced. And as I said, he has rewritten our relationship, and we are very close now. So I can see that there has been a bearing of fruit based on what she planted. Now, the second question is, what values do you desire to pass on to your own children or to any youth you may mentor? So as much as it is important for us to be able to recognize the values that we caught, the positive things that we caught, and in so doing, we could also kind of make a decision to walk away from the negative things, because they may have been negative influences that impacted us. Perhaps the way we deal with people, we may, you know, sometimes there can be lots of impatience, a lot of anger, because maybe that is what we witnessed. And that was something that was demonstrated to us that we picked up that was negative. It certainly wasn't a value, but it was something that we picked up that was negative, a learned behavior that we witnessed, that we imbibed, that we followed. And certainly we can come to realize those things and choose to walk away from them as well, because there are many of us who came from broken homes who made a decision that is not going to happen in my home. I'm going to make sure that I am a good mother. I'm going to make sure that I'm a good father. And there are lots of us who've made those decisions. So there is choice in all that we do. So in the same way that we can decide to walk away from perhaps negative influences, we can decide as well to embrace the positive, embrace those things that impacted us positively. And those values that we were able to catch, we can now seek to pass them on to the next generation. And that is what I try to do with my own children. You know, certainly my marriage has not been perfect, or my family is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, because no families are perfect. But there's a lot of love in our home. And I know that the love that my husband and I feel for each other, that this is something that our sons can look up to, and it is something that they can look forward to in their own relationships. And not only them, but the young people that are around us and the people that we know, the adults that we interface with. We want to inspire you to love and to catch the right values that you can pass on to the next generation. Thanks so much for joining me for this edition of Read With Me. I'm Denise Charles. My book is Tonight I Am a Butterfly. I'll see you next time.